Alrighty then, students. Good evening. I hope that you all are well. Kindly note that the recording has started. Kindly advise if you can hear my voice. I haven't shared anything as of yet, and please note that your microphones and your cameras have been disabled. So if there's any issues or concerns, please let me know via the chat. Okay? So it might take some time for me to look at the chat whilst I am busy with the session. So please, students, also kindly complete the attendance register if you have already done so. Kudos to you. All right. So yeah, I remember we had our last session on the 2nd. Yeah, that was before the unfortunate incident. However, we are going to continue. So we basically ended off with the labor market, right? I have been sharing that memo with you quite a few times. I have uploaded it onto the SharePoint folder as well. So we will continue working from that document. I know we've done a lot of work on the labor market. We've done a lot of few sessions on perfect and imperfect competition. I know for a fact we've also done quite a few sessions on production and cost theory, as well as utilities. Okay, but we are now going to move back, seeing that this is now our last session, students. Those sessions from the labor market that I've just mentioned now, perfect, imperfect competition, production, and cost theory, should still relatively be fresh in your mind. All right, and as mentioned, if you need the recordings of those recordings, kindly reach out, kindly email ctntot@unisa.ac.za. Right? If you need the recordings. Okay. So I am going to share my screen now. Just kindly advise if you can see my screen. If you can see your name, you can see my screen. Eh? Well, not if you everyone can't see the name, but if you can see some names and my cursor, you can see my screen. Okay, there's one thumbs up over there. So I assume that it is fine with you all, students. All right. There's a no there. Can you see my screen? Can you see some names over here? Adila? Can you see now? Okay. There we go. So let's continue. So we've done this, right? We have basically cross-categorized and cross-referenced this document, students. But we are going to move to the ones in the beginning, okay? Like demand and supply, elasticity, etc. Okay, students. Not worried so much about this one. We've already done this question. I've sent you that notes as well. We've done production and cost theory. Look, students, to a lesser extent, you will be tested on the production possibilities curve, maybe one or two or even three questions. All right, even on the definition of economics. Right. So economics is the study of what? Is the study of how scarce resources are allocated in an attempt to satisfy unlimited ones. Right? Because in economics, we have unlimited needs and wants, but scarce means scarcity is a central concept in economics. Scarcity implies choice, and once a choice is made, opportunity cost is incurred. All right, so economics is the study of how scarce resources are allocated in an attempt to satisfy unlimited ones. Just something for you to read on, students. Relatively simple. Okay, especially in the first chapters. I only want to go over this this PPC curve over here, the production possibilities curve. All right, now with the production possibilities curve, students, if you can, well, we've done this the whole year, way in the beginning of the year. And of course, time flies, but yeah. So the production possibilities curve basically shows the combination of two goods that a business or an industry or a community can produce using all of their resources. So what are the resources? Your labor, your natural resources, land, your capital, and your entrepreneurship. Right, so over here we have ships and swords, and of course, each and every point on the production possibilities curve shows that combination. Now you see in this production possibilities curve for well, this is a very interesting name, Narnia. All right, not going to argue about the choice of names. So yeah, let's leave it at ease. Okay. Also, students, what you should know, well, is that all points outside the PPC curve is unattainable. Right? And if it's unattainable, it also implies scarcity. Because Narnia simply don't have the resources to produce it. So now you see, on the PPC curve, we have point A, we have point D, and we have point, A, E, and C over here. But you see point B, that combination lies outside of the production possibilities curve. So that means point B is actually, or combination B, is unattainable. Narnia simply does not have the resources to produce combination B. Are we together, students? That is basically what we should know, right? If I didn't send you the link, you need to follow up with them. You need to follow up with them regularly. All right. If you send one email and then you don't get the response, please follow up every day or follow up every half a day. But with that being said, students, let us check the historical chat. I think somewhere I have actually shared that link with you whilst I have you here. Let me just check that. All right. I did say that the links will never change, eh? Even the link to the recording playlist, that will never change, students. So I'm just finding the recording playlist, eh? Okay. And of course, this PC is still relatively old. It is relatively old, so it does take some time. All right, so yeah. If you have the link to the I'll just see if I can find it, students. It is going to take some time, right? But once we find it, it will save us. It will save you a lot of time as the students, right? I think there what it was. No, that's a form. Sorry, that's a form. I'm now getting to that new comment or message. Okay. Having to fight with this old thing over here on this side. Not very nice. But anyway, let's continue. Remember, your microphones are disabled, so you can't talk during these sessions. I think this is it. Yeah, there we go. Found it. Just want to copy and paste it. There we go. So this is the recording playlist, students. All right, we can even check if all the other recordings were uploaded. Right. Thank you for the link, Homocho. The link that Homocho said, students, this is now the link of the notes. All right. I've done quite a few demonstrations on that. So you, again, students, if you haven't saved these links, please do so. All right, because your exam is in a few days' time. So if you click on this link of what the notes say, it will take you to this page. Of course, just give me some time. Right, verifying the link. It will take you to this page. If you click on that link that Homocho said, save this link. I've been saying this in the past sessions as well. Right, there's no recordings there. However, you click on Open Class Notes folder. And of course, in that folder, students, you're going to have to put in your UNISA, your My Life at UNISA credentials. So your email address and your password. Once you've done that, students, you did the authentication and everything, you will have direct access to the SharePoint folder. And you can download all the notes there because everything that we have been doing, right, before the 2nd of October, it is in that SharePoint folder. All right, are we together, students? Okay. And then, of course, the recording playlist. So you just click on that. It will take you to YouTube. Right. That's the recording playlist. And also note that, okay, that's fine. That's fine. Let's leave it at that. Let's just check our recording playlist over here. As you can see, there's the 2nd of October. That was the last session that we had, eh? There's the 25th of September. There's the 10th of September. So basically, you should be sorted, students, with these. Now, there are also some recordings on ECS1500, eh? So unfortunately, that's also there. But as you can see, there is the practice assessments that we did. Remember that practice assessment on excess demand and excess supply? There's the sessions on demand, simultaneous changes. It's all there. Right, so then I don't have to go over everything in detail again. So all of the recordings are there, students. So you are more than welcome. There are 20 recordings. And of course, with today's one, there's going to be 21. Okay, but regardless of what we do today, students, what we are going to be doing now, or busy currently doing, is embedded in all of these recordings over here. Are we sorted? Are we happy? So yeah. Okay. You will get to elasticity. Eh? You will get to elasticity. I just want to explain this PPC curve over here. Very, very briefly. But you know I tend to talk a lot. So bear with me in that sense, students. Just bear with me in that sense. Okay, so all points outside the production possibilities curve is unattainable, and that also indicates scarcity. Right, so point B is unattainable over here. All right. Point A, E, and C, these points lie on the PPC curve. So all points on the PPC curve indicates all points on the PPC curve are attainable and using all resources. You can also say efficient production takes place on the PPC curve. Why does efficient production takes place, students? Because all the resources are in use. All right. And then, of course, all points inside the PPC curve are attainable, yes, are attainable, but inefficient production is taking place, right? Also, all points on the PPC curve shows a choice and opportunity cost. Remember, students, you see over here, points A, E, and C lies on the production possibilities curve. But this or Narnia cannot produce point A and E and C. You see, they can't produce that. They can only produce A or E or C. All right, they can only produce, so therefore, a choice has to be made over here. And once a choice is made, students, opportunity cost is incurred. All right. Now, what you also need to know is that on the production possibilities curve, opportunity cost can be calculated moving down the production possibilities curve, right? Moving down and also moving up. Do you see? Right? Are we together, students? Opportunity cost can be calculated moving up the production possibilities curve and also down the production possibilities curve. Now let's just calculate, let's do some examples over here. Calculating the opportunity cost moving down. So we are going to calculate the opportunity cost. I'm just going to type it over here. I know we haven't even answered any questions over here, but we're going to calculate the opportunity cost moving from point A to E, right? And then the opportunity cost moving from point E to C. And then finally not actually finally, from point A to C. Now what you need to know, students, if we want to move down the production possibilities curve, it means that we are seeking to increase our production of sorts. Do you see there? So if we are seeking to increase our production of sorts moving down the production possibilities curve, what are we going to have to give up? We are going to have to give up the amount of ships. Do you see? So moving down the production possibilities curve, we are seeking to increase our production of sorts. Hence, the opportunity cost will then be reflected in the amount of ships that we give up. So say, for example, we want to move from point A to point E. So at point A, you are producing 0 swords but 12 ships. Do you see? But if you want to move from point A to point E, that means you are increasing your production of swords from 0 to 6,000. However, you have decreased your production of ships from 12 to 8. So that means the opportunity cost of moving from point A to E, it's not the amount of swords that you produce, it is the amount of ships that you have to give up. So the opportunity cost of moving from point A to E will then thus be 4 ships. That will be 4 ships. Are we together, students? 4 ships is the opportunity cost of moving from point A to E, because it is the amount of the good that we have to give up. All right. Okay. Moving from point E to C, as you can see at point E over there, students, at point E you are producing 6,000 swords and 8 ships. You see there. But if you want to move from point from point E to C, you still want to increase your production of swords over here. Do you see? So in doing so, you are going to have to give up an amount of swords as well. So at point E, you are producing 6,000 swords and 8 ships. But if you want to move to point C, you are going to producing 10,000 swords and 0 ships. So how much of the amount of ships that you have to give up over there? It is 8 ships. So from E to C, students, The opportunity cost will then be 8 ships over there. And if you want to move from point A to C, that means at point A you are seeking to increase your production of swords from 0 to 10,000. In doing so, students, you are going to have to give up 12 ships, because at point C you are producing 10,000 swords but no ships. But at point A you were producing no swords but 12 ships over there. So that means the opportunity cost moving from point A to C, that's going to be 12 ships. Are we together, students? Are we together? Alrighty then. Perfect. Okay. Now we can calculate the opportunity cost moving up over here. Okay. You can with a graph such as this, students, you can either be asked points that are attainable and unattainable, efficient production, inefficient production. You can be asked that, or you can also be asked to calculate opportunity cost. All right, so we are now going to calculate the opportunity cost, students. Opportunity cost moving from C to E, right? And then also from E to A, and then also finally from C to A. So in other words, we are now going to move upwards. Do you see? So in moving upwards, students, let's say we want to move up on the production possibilities curve. We are actually seeking to increase our production of ships over here. Do you see? Moving up the production possibilities curve. And in doing so, now the opportunity cost will be reflected in the amount of swords that we have to give up. Do you see? Right? It does look a little bit like a dog breakfast over here. But of course, it is captured in the recording. So at point C, you are producing 10,000 swords and 0 ships. But if you want to move from point C to point E, what are you producing at point E? 6,000 swords, but also now 8 ships. So you have succeeded in increasing your production of ships from 0 to 8. But how many swords you had to give up? You had to give up 4,000 swords, because at point C you were producing 10,000 swords. But now at point E you're only producing 6,000 swords. You have increased your production of ships from 0 to 8, yes, but you had to give up 4,000 swords. So the opportunity cost of moving from point C to E, that is going to be 4,000 swords. Right? That's 4,000 swords over there. Right. Moving from point E to point A. At point E, you were producing 6,000 swords and 8 ships. But now you want to move from point E to point A. So that means you want to further increase your production of ships from 8 to 12. But in doing so, students, you are going to have to give up all of your swords over here. So at point E, you are producing 6,000 swords, but at point A, you are producing 0 swords. So that means the opportunity cost moving from point E to point A, students, that's going to be 6,000 swords over there. And then finally, moving from point C, way down from point C, way up to point A, you are seeking to increase your production of ships from 0 to 12. And in doing so, you are going to have to give up all of your swords that you produced. So the opportunity cost moving from point C to point A, students, that's going to be 10,000 swords. Are we together, students? How we would calculate over there, right? Are we happy? Alrighty then. You can't remember your microphones and your cameras were disabled, so you need to type your question in the chat. You need to type your question in the chat. Alrighty then. So once I've done this recording, students, you are more than welcome to reach out to the academic literacies department, the unit CT and TAT. So so that they can upload this recording as soon as possible onto the playlist. Alrighty then, so that is basically the crux of the production possibilities curve, students. Alright, you can see over there, Narnia is currently producing 8 ships, but decides to increase the production of ships to 12. So let's see, where does Narnia produce 8 ships? Narnia produces 8 ships at point E. Do you see there? If you look at that question over there, right? Narnia is currently producing 8 ships but want to increase the production of ships to 12. So in this case, when Narnia was producing 8 ships, they were at point E, right? They were producing 8 ships and 6,000 swords. But if they want to increase their production of ships from 8 to 12, that means at when producing 12 ships, they're producing 0 swords. So the opportunity cost of wanting to increase your production of ships from 8 to 12, they are going to have to give up 6,000 swords. That is another way in which the question can be asked. So the answer over there is option number 3, right? That's going to be 6,000. And please note, students, that this is actually memo as well. So the answers are there. All right. If you look at question 2 over here, we want to see which point shows efficient use of resources. But if you go to a graph again, right? Points A, E, and C shows efficient use of resources, whilst point B is the only thing that shows unattainable. You see, so we know point A, E, and C, so we need to find a combination of either AB, EB, or CB. You see, AB, EB, or CB. So we get option 1 is AB. There's the only one that shows AB. So point A shows efficient use of resources. Why? Because it lies on the PPC curve. Whilst point B is unattainable. Why? Because it lies outside of the PPC curve. You see. And hence our answer for number 2 is option number 1. Are we together, students? Are we happy? All right. You have to ensure that you type very fast. Yeah. Alrighty then. It says over here, what will most likely happen when there is an influx of workers into Narnia? So if there's an influx of workers into Narnia, it means that the number of resources will increase. Do you see? And if the number of resources increase, students, that means our production possibilities curve will actually now shift. Because now, if there's an influx of workers, that means we can produce more ships. We can even produce more swords as well. Do you see? So the answer over there, if there's an influx of workers, students, it means now point B, which was previously unattainable, will now be attainable because the production possibilities curve will shift to the right. Do you see? Due to the influx of workers. Are we together? So our answer over here, right, for number 4, question 4, will be that point B could become attainable because they will be able to produce more, right? That would be our answer for number 4. You want me to repeat question 2, students? Question 2, remember, I can repeat question 2, it's not an issue. But what you need to know is all points outside the PPC curve shows unattainable and also scarcity. All points on the PPC curve are attainable and using all resources. In other words, efficient production is taking place. All points inside, which you can see point D, is attainable, but inefficient reproduction is taking place. In other words, they are wasting resources over here. They could have produced on the production possibilities. You see. Now, if you were to go to question 2 says it's basically fill in the blanks. So we need to determine which point shows an efficient use of resources. Efficient use of resources is the exact same thing as efficient production, right? Efficient use of resources is the exact same thing as efficient production, right? So we need to find the point that shows efficient production. So the points that shows efficient production are the points that lies on the PPC curve, which is point A, point E, and C. But also to fill in the blanks, because there's a combination, we need to find the point that is unattainable. So a point that is unattainable is only point B. So our possible answers for this question, or the combination of options, right? Answers would then be A and B, also E and B, and also C and B. So now what do we see? We see there's A and B over there, but we don't see EB. Remember, E first and then B, not B and E. E first and then B. C first and then B. We don't see these two options over here. So we have to assume that it is option number one. Point A shows efficient use of resources, while point B is unattainable. Are we happy now? And of course, the influx of workers, it means more workers are coming in. And what are workers? Workers are resources, factors of production. Remember, labor. So that means if there's an influx of workers, it means that the number of workers will increase. And if the number of workers increase, it means that you can produce more swords. You can produce more ships as well. That's why, students, your production possibilities curve will now shift to the right. So it means you can produce more ships, you can produce more swords. And in that way, the answer for that means that point B, which was previously unattainable, will now become attainable, because now you have more resources. If you have more resources, you have more, of course, more workers includes more, equals more resources, meaning that you can produce more ships and you can produce more swords. So point B will now become attainable if that is the case over there. Are we together? The influx of workers. Influx is a positive thing, right? It's an increase in the number of workers, not works, it's workers. Okay? Are we together? It's in the textbook, students, especially the summary notes at the end of the chapter. Okay, this is the first chapter in your textbook. I've shared with you the textbook as well. All right. So we can move on from that, right? From the production possibilities curve. Positive statements and normative statements, students. I'm not going to go over that because that is pretty straightforward, right? Positive statement is based on facts, theory, as long as it can be tested, right? Normative statement is what ought to be. It's more subjective, right? And then, of course, students, economic systems. Economic systems basically refers to how resources, the mechanism behind how resources are allocated and distributed in an economy, right? We have the command system, right? Command system has two facets. The command system is where the government exerts control in terms of the allocation of resources. You see, if the government has full control, we call that communism. If the government has partial control, we call that socialism. You see, there's also the traditional system. I remember talking about the traditional system, where you have your village type setup over there with the chief or the paramount king or the paramount chief, right? When it comes to the allocation of resources, that is the responsibility of the chief, the paramount king, etc. That is how resources are allocated, distributed, in a traditional system, right? If you can, we'll think of another example, maybe in the times of the life of King Shaka. All right, I'm not knowledgeable when it comes to history, students. I didn't study history in primary school and in high school, yes, but not from grade 10 onwards. Okay, but that is your traditional setup. Then, of course, you have your market economy, right, or your market system. That is purely capitalism, right? Capitalism in the purest sense, where the allocation and distribution of resources, students, is driven by competition. So, in other words, if you can afford to pay for that resource, you get it. Do you see? Competition is the driving force in a market economy, in a capitalist society. And then, of course, you have a mixed system, a mixture of capitalism, a mixture of the traditional system, a mixture of communism or socialism. Do you see? And a prime example of that would be South Africa, because we have our traditional system. Okay, we have our Xhosa kings, our Zulu king, Venda chief, etc. Right, and of course we have our, we have one of the most sophisticated uh, private sectors in the world. And then, of course, we have the government that also provides goods and services. Now, your SASA grants, etc. We are not going to get into the corruption and the inefficiency over there, but that is an example, right? And of course, the central economic questions: what to produce, how to produce it, and of course, for whom are we producing it? Okay? What to produce, how are you going to produce it, and for whom will it be produced? So the one that is not a central economic question, students, is number 2. Who will produce it? Because we couldn't care less who produces it, right? It is what goods and services will be produced. How will these goods and services be produced? And for whom will these goods and services be produced? So number 2 over there for question 6. That is the incorrect one. And that is actually the one that we want over there. Right, but chapter 1, students, the first chapter is straightforward. The only thing that can be a little bit complex over there is the production possibilities curve. All right. Are we sorted, students, with the production possibilities curve? Perfect. Now you see we already, there's only about an hour and 20 minutes. You know, time flies, students. So let's rather skip question number 1, right? South Africa is a mixed economy. Okay, South Africa is a mixed economy, right? Just remember that. Also, the what you call it, the circular flow, students. That should be relatively simple. All right. Also, the remuneration of the factors of production. Natural resources is the same as land, and the remuneration for natural resources is rent. All right. That is the remuneration for natural resources. It is rent. Okay. Now, please note, students, that this chapter, with the production possibilities curve, etc., that is basically, let's say you are doing microeconomics on its own and macroeconomics on its own, right? This chapter is relevant to both micro and macroeconomics, right? So we always start with this. This just provides you with with that introduction. Okay. What we do know also, students, is that households are the owners of the factors of production. And factors of production are traded in a factor market. Right? So households, they sell their factors of production in the factor market in exchange for income. So in other words, households own natural resources, they own labor, they own capital, and of course, they are the entrepreneurs, they own entrepreneurship. Okay? That is according to theory. Right? And then, of course, if they sell that resources, that factors of production in the factor market, they get income in return. Do you see? And of course, households use that income to buy goods and services in the goods market. Now, what does the firm do? The firm buys factors of production in the factor market, and what flows from the factor market to the firms is factors of production. The firms use that factors of production, they combine it to produce goods and services, which they then sell to households in the goods market. You see. Now, the goods market, students, is where you find the market forces of demand and supply, which we've also done. Okay, in case you were wondering, right? It says over here, which of the following can be a real example of the arrow labeled A? That's spending, because firms also spend in the factor market. Remember, the firms cannot produce goods and services by plucking it out of thin air. They need resources, and they need to pay for that resources. Okay, so that arrow over there, A, that's actually spending. All right, in case you were wondering. Okay, also arrow labeled B. Okay, that is goods and services. Right, that is food over there, because yeah, that is food. Right, for number 11, that is food. So number 12, they talk about the law of demand. Remember the law of demand? All other things being held equal or ceteris paribus, the higher the price, the lower the quantity demanded. Higher the price, the lower the quantity demanded. That is the law of demand, students. Right, the lower the quantity demanded. Are we happy thus far? Are we sorted thus far? Now, students, we won't be able to go over what you call it, production and cost theory and utilities. So please, that notes that I've shared with you before the 2nd of October, also the recordings are there. So you theoretically, you should be fine. All right. So that's the law of demand. But let's see over here. Which of the following illustrates the law of demand best? John really want to attend the concert. Even when the price of a ticket increase, he still bought one. That's incorrect. That does not describe the law of demand. So Jane sells dresses. When she increased the price of dresses, she sold more. Jane is actually a producer, not a consumer. Remember, law of demand has to deal with consumer, so it's not number 2. Okay. Jason wants to buy the most expensive diamond ring for his fiancée. That also does not describe or illustrate the law of demand, because he wants to buy the most expensive ring for his fiancée. If that was the law of demand, then he wouldn't buy an expensive ring. You see. But if you look at number 4, Jacob wanted to buy a t-shirt when he bought 2 when he saw it was on sale. So the law of demand can also be interpreted as this, students. If the price decreases, the quantity demanded increases. That's the vice versa of that one. Right? If the price decreases, the quantity demanded increases. So when he saw it was on sale, it means it was cheaper, he bought more. So number 4, students, illustrates the law of demand best. Are we together, students? Number 4 illustrates the law of demand best. Okay? Are we happy? Alrighty then. Also, students, we've also done some classes on government intervention. Remember price floors and price ceilings? It is embedded in that recordings over there. All right, it is embedded there. Number 13, it says over here, which of the following is most likely to happen during the drought? Now remember, a drought, students, is a natural disaster. Okay, a drought is a natural disaster. And of course, a natural disaster affects the supply, right? It affects the supply. However, it does not, so it affects supply. It does not affect the quantity supply because remember, according to the law of supply, students, let me just type it here. Law of supply basically states that higher the price, the higher the quantity supplied. So now you see, students, quantity supplied can only change if there is a change in the price. Are we together? So quantity supplied can only change if there is a change in the price. But in this case, the question says, which of the following is most likely to happen during a drought? So natural disasters affects supply, not the quantity supplied. The quantity supplied is dependent on the price. Do you see? So we can actually cut out number 2 and we can cut out number 4. A natural disaster, a drought, is a bad thing because it will decrease the supply of whatever vegetables or crops. Do you see? So the answer over there would be option number 3. A drought will cause a decrease in the supply of vegetables. If it was a positive or a pleasant weather condition, right, there would be an increase of the supply in the supply of vegetables. But there's a drought. A drought is a natural disaster. Do you see? Quantity supplied is only affected by, quantity supply can only be affected by the price. Similarly with quantity demanded. Quantity demanded can only be changed if there's a change in the price. Do you see? However, we need to study those factors that will influence the demand as well. And that is also in the notes, students. Okay. So click on that link, go through all of that SharePoint folders over there. You will find what you are looking for. All right. Let's look at number 14. Are we together with question 12 and question 13, students? Are we happy? Are we following? Okay, perfect. All right, let's continue. So number 14 says, what area on the below graph represents producer surplus? Okay, if you look at your graph over here, students, firstly, you let us see over here. There is your equilibrium point, eh? Equilibrium point, that's point E, right? Your equilibrium price is PM. Your equilibrium quantity is QM. Right, so your consumer surplus is the area of the origin of your demand curve that stretches from the maximum price that you are willing to pay to the equilibrium price and then to the equilibrium position over there. So this triangle over here, students, that is known as your consumer surplus, right? That is your consumer surplus. Your producer surplus, on the other hand, stretches from the origin of your supply curve, which is the minimum price. It stretches from that point to your equilibrium price over there. And of course, from your equilibrium price, it moves to your equilibrium position. So this triangle over here, or this half triangle as you want to call it, that is your producer surplus, PS. Are we together? So now we just need to determine the area. So it would be PMOE. So producer surplus can be, let's just do the consumer surplus first, even though it's not a question. The consumer surplus, the area can be depicted as P1, PM, or E, or you can depict it as, in this case, it could be PM, P1, E, or you can even depict it as E, P1, and PM, or you can depict it as E, PM, P1. Do you see? That is the different ways in which this area can, it's the same area, but that's the different ways in which it can be depicted. Now for the producer surplus, students, it can also be depicted in this way. It is PM, then of course 0.0, sorry, it's PM, 0, and E, It could also be depicted as 0 PM E. It could also be depicted as E0 PM, or it can be depicted as EPM0. Are we together, students, with the area over here of the producer surplus? Check for those of you that have just joined, I've shared the links earlier. Just check the historical chat, please. All right, just check the historical chat. So this is the link, and please, students, save this link. Right, just save this link over here. Save these links. I know some of you have joined late, but please save these links. Where does the M come from? The M is in the graph. PM. That is this point over here, in case you were wondering. I just want to use the eraser, students, over here. Right? Why is this happening? There's the eraser. Yes. In case you were wondering, there's the PM. Right? There's the PM. Right? There's the PM over there. Are we happy? Okay. There's the link. And please save that link. That's the link to the notes. Right? No, it does not sound funny. It's a question. It's a legitimate question. So how does one know when it is consumer or producer surplus? Right? Remember, students, the demand curve reflects the consumer. All right? The supply curve reflects the producer. Just remember that. Demand curve reflects consumer. Supply curve reflects producer. Now, when there's equilibrium, students, both consumers and producers, because in equilibrium, potential buyers and potential sellers are happy. They've reached consensus. Do you see? Now, how does the consumer surplus work? Consumer surplus is not a profit. It is a intangible benefit that the consumer enjoys. Let's say, for example, let's look at from the perspective of the consumer. You see in this graph over here, I'm going to zoom in again over here, right? You look at this graph over here, students. Right, look at this graph over here. I'm getting back to question 12 and 13. I just want to specify this over here. Right, remember, consumer surplus is an intangible, in layman's term, it's an intangible benefit. Let's say, for example, students, this is the market for jeans. Okay, we are all consumers over here. Let's assume that all 121 of us, we are consumers. We are going to buy a pair of jeans. Now, each and every one of us in our mind, students, we have set aside 700 Rand for a pair of jeans, right? That is the maximum amount that we are going to pay for a pair of jeans. We need a pair of jeans and we have 700 Rand. That is the maximum amount that we are going to pay for that jean. Are we together, students? Are we together? That's the 700 Rand. In our mind, we're not going to pay more than 700 Rand for a pair of jeans. But now going to Edgar's or going to Markham, etc., we get the pair of jeans that we want, but now the pair of jeans cost 450 Rand. Do you see? You were willing to pay 700 Rand for a pair of jeans, but now you are getting it for 450 Rand. Do you see? That is the benefit that you are enjoying. And that is the consumer surplus. So in a graph, where would that 700 be depicted? That would be your price one, because that is the maximum price that the consumer is willing to pay. Do you see? But they are paying a price lower than that, which is the equilibrium price of 450, or PM in this case, right? Then, of course, that is the consumer, that is the surplus per consumer. But remember, there are more. This is the entire consumer surplus in the market for jeans. Do you see? That's why this area over here, this triangle, right? Between the origin of your demand curve and your equilibrium price, that is your consumer surplus, your total consumer surplus. Producer surplus on the other hand, so now we are putting ourselves in the shoes of a producer. In this case, students, the origin of the supply curve is at 0. But remember, the origin of the supply curve can be anywhere on the price axis, right? Hypothetically speaking, let's now say we all are producers, we produce jeans, okay? It costs us maybe 10 Rand to produce a jean. That is the cost price. We are willing to accept the lowest price that we are willing to accept as producers is 10 Rand for a pair of jeans. Okay? But now the jeans is selling for 400 Rand in the market. You see, that is the equilibrium price of a jean. We were willing to accept 10 Rand for a pair of jeans. But a pair of jeans sells for 400 Rand in the market. So now that difference between the 10 Rand and the 400 and that 390 Rand, that is our producer surplus. We were willing to accept as low as 10 Rand for a pair of jeans, but we are getting 400 Rand. So another intangible benefit over there. You see, that is the producer surplus. So this point over here, students, remember I said the supply curve doesn't always have its origin out of 0. It can be any point. Its origin can be there, its origin can be there. You see. So the minimum price that the supplier is willing to accept for that jean, right, and the area between the equilibrium price that they are getting for it, this triangular area over here is our producer surplus. Are we together? Would you be able now to determine the producer surplus and consumer surplus? Perfect. All right. Go over those notes, students, right? Go over those notes. Because who knows, you might get a question where you actually where these are values given to you. Let's make up some values, seeing that we have it over here. Let's say P1 is 60 Rand, right? And let's say PM is 35 Rand. And of course, we have 0 over there. The quantity in the market is 150. Hypothetically speaking, that's the equilibrium quantity in the market. Now, if the question asks you to calculate, let's say the question asks you to calculate consumer surplus. And the question also asks you to calculate producer surplus. But let's calculate consumer surplus first. And then we calculate producer surplus thereafter. Right. So for consumer surplus, the formula is half, right? Half times basis times height, right? So what is the basis? The basis, students, is equal to the equilibrium quantity. That is the basis. You see, the equilibrium quantity. That is the basis, in case you were wondering. That's the 150 over there. But what is the height? The height is the difference between the maximum price minus the equilibrium price. I think I need to make this a little bit smaller. All right. It is the maximum price minus the equilibrium price. Do you see? So let's calculate it. Our half is 0.5. That's because it's half a triangle. The area of a triangle. You see, it's half basis times height. That we have learned for those of us that have done mathematics, maths literacy. Okay. What is the basis? The basis is 150, which is the equilibrium quantity. And of course, what is the height? The height is the difference between the maximum price of 60 Rand and the equilibrium price of 35 Rand. You see. And of course, we can further simplify that. It's 0.5 multiplied by 150 multiplied by 25. Can somebody give me the answer over there, please, for the consumer surplus? 1,875. Are we in agreement with that, students? Perfect. That would be our consumer surplus, our total consumer surplus in the market. Okay. Producer surplus can also be calculated the same way because the formula is the same. It's half basis times height, but of course there's only going to be a slight difference over here, students. Right? The basis is still the equilibrium quantity, but the height in this case, students, it is the difference between the equilibrium price and the minimum price. You see. So the equilibrium price, the difference between the equilibrium price, right? Equilibrium price and of course the minimum price. In case you were wondering what is the minimum price, the minimum price of course is the origin of your supply curve. So in this case we can actually calculate the producer surplus. So 0,5 multiplied by the basis of 150, which is the equilibrium quantity, multiplied by the equilibrium price of 35 minus the minimum price, and the minimum price in this case is 0. Do you see? So now we can do further simplification over here. It's 0,5 multiplied by 150 multiplied by 35. And of course, what is our answer over there, students, for producer surplus? 2,625. Are we together, students? And that is 2,625 Rand. That is our total producer surplus. And then if the question asks you to calculate total surplus. Total surplus is basically just your consumer surplus plus your producer surplus. And that is of course 1,875 plus 2,625. And what is our answer over there, students, for total surplus? Can somebody give me the answer over there? 4,500. Bob's your uncle. That is your total surplus over there. Are we together? Are we happy with consumer and producer surplus? Perfect. Okay. Let's look at this as well. Let's go back to number 12, eh? So you had a question on number 12. Remember the law of demand, students. The higher the price, the lower the quantity demanded. Also, the lower the price, the higher the quantity demanded. If it means that if the price of a product increase or if it is expensive, you are not going to buy that product, or you're going to buy less of that product because the price increased. That is the law of demand. Now, if the price of that good decreased, if that good becomes cheaper, you are going to buy more of it. Do you see? So question 12 says, which of the following illustrates the law of demand best? We look at number 1. John really wanted to attend a concert. Even when the price of a ticket increased, he still bought one. So that means John does not reflect the law of demand because the price of a ticket increased, he still bought one. If he didn't buy a ticket, then that would have reflected the law of demand. Why? Because the price increased. Do you see? But John went ahead and still bought the ticket. So therefore, John cannot illustrate, in this case, does not illustrate the law of demand. Do you see? If you look at number 2, Jane sells dresses. She sells dresses, which means that she's a producer. She's a supplier. She's not demanding it. She's supplying it. She sells it. So therefore, the law of demand does not apply to Jane because Jane sells dresses. Do you see? She's not buying it. Number 3, Jason wants to buy the most expensive diamond ring for his fiancée. So he's going out of his way You see, but if Jason would have reflected or illustrated the law of demand, he would have never gone out of his way. He would have actually bought the cheapest diamond ring for his fiance. But seeing that he's not buying the cheapest diamond ring for his fiance, he does not reflect or illustrate the law of demand. Do you see? Jacob shirt, sorry. And he bought two when he saw it was on sale. A sale implies that the price is cheaper. So that means the price was cheaper. He went and go ahead and bought two. So that means his quantity demanded for shirts increased. So therefore, Jacob truly illustrates or reflects the law of demand. Does that answer your question? We did not get 0.5. That's the formula. All right. Um, So the people who actually compose the formula for consumer surplus, you can, yeah, that's historical people. All right. So we did not pluck the 0.5 out of thin air. It was there. That was the formula that we actually did in school. All right. Perfect. Okay. All right. So hopefully that answers the question on number 12. And then, of course, number 13, students. Which of the following is most likely to happen during a drought? A drought is a natural disaster. And when we looked at the factors that will cause change the supply or impact the supply, natural disasters was one of it. Do you see? Natural disasters was one of it because it affects supply. It affects, you see. Now you see there's two options over there that talks about the change in the quantity supplied of vegetables. But remember, we introduced the law of supply. It says the higher the price, the higher the quantity supplied. And also the lower the price, the lower the quantity supplied. So that means that quantity supplied is dependent on the price of the product. So if there's any change in the price of the product, only then will and question again, it says, which following is most likely to happen during a drought? Nowhere when what is going to happen in the terms if there's a change in the price. No, it is supposed to happen during a drought. So drought is a natural disaster which affects the supply. Or because it talks about the quantity supply. And the quantity supplied of vegetables is dependent on the price of vegetables, not a drought or a natural disaster. See? But a natural disaster is a bad thing. That's why it's called a natural disaster. A drought is not called, a drought is not good. A drought is actually bad because now increase in the supply of vegetables, it, your vegetable crops. Therefore, it to happen. So that answers your question. All right, together. You're not incorrect over there, Pigo, no? That 25, that is the consumer surplus per. But what we have calculated over here, that 1,875, that is the consumer surplus for the entire market. You see, that 25, that is the consumer surplus per person. Yes, are we together? And the 35 calculated for producer surplus, that producer surplus per person. Does that answer your question? I see. Am I breaking up, students? Is my voice clear? Yeah, that's the network, unfortunately. All right. And yes, this is actually our last class. Yes. Is my voice clear now? Students, is my voice clear? Okay. Alrighty then. Well, that's the things of that is I'm saying that you weren't incorrect when you remember your previous question. You said I thought that the consumer surplus would be 25. You are not wrong there. That 25 is the consumer surplus per person. But what we've calculated over here, right? There's 1,875 that we've calculated over here, all right? That is the entire consumer surplus for the market. But the 25 rand or that 25 over there, that is the consumer surplus per person. Are we together? Are we together? That is the consumer surplus per person. All right? Perfect. Now let's move on. Now, all good things come to an end, students. All right? Nothing lasts forever. We haven't even answered question 14. But we see over here PMOE, that area. So our answer over there is number 2. And please note, as mentioned over here, students, the areas can be asked in different ways, because it's the exact same area. It doesn't need to be in the exact sequence. Like I said, look at the consumer surplus, that area and the different sequences over there. Look at the producer surplus, this area with the different sequences over there. Just bear that in mind, right? Let's move on to question 15. Yeah, these are interesting questions over here. Socks and shoes are complements in consumption. Okay? Socks and shoes are complements in consumption. Right? Very, very importantly. What will happen in the market for socks if the supply of shoes decreases? Interesting. Shoes and socks are complements in consumption. What will happen in the market for socks if the supply of shoes decreases? Now, firstly, students, let's draw our markets over here. So this now tests our knowledge on equilibrium, right? So it does test our knowledge on that. Okay. So we have over here, we have socks, oh, sorry. We have shoes over here, right? We have shoes. And then, of course, we have socks over here. Socks. Amasogis. Yeah, we have socks over here. Okay. Of course, we need to, there's our price axis over there. And there's our quantity axis over there. There's, of course, our price axis over there for socks. Our quantity axis over there. That's a Q, I know it looks a little bit suspect, but it's a Q. Don't know if we actually perfect it like it. There's our demand curve for shoes. Initial demand curve, And there's our initial supply curve for shoes over there. Okay. There's the equilibrium price or the initial equilibrium price for shoes. All right. So there is our price. We call that P0. Okay. And then, of course, we call this Q0. That's our equilibrium quantity for shoes. Right. And of course, there's our equilibrium point over there, our initial equilibrium point. We call that point E. That's a E. Right. Then, of course, we do the same for socks. There is our demand curve for socks. And there is our supply curve for socks. Okay. Alrighty then. Let's do this, students. You know what? You know what? This is what I'm going to do. I just had an epiphany. Okay. Seeing that I have you here, so I think we can actually have maybe a hour session, right? So let's make it an hour session for consultation. I will send a bulk email, students. If you have never received an email from me before, right? If you have never received an email from me before, students, please put your email address in the chat. Only if you have never received an email from me before. If you've received an email from me before, then most likely I have your email address. All right, I'm going to send you I'm going to send you a link for an online group consultation class for tomorrow evening. Let's make it for 7:45 up until 8:45 because I have another class at 9. All right. So I am going to send you that link. Please do not put your UNISA email if you have already if you have already given me your email address in the past, eh? Because then of course you're gonna receive the same email maybe twice or thrice. Okay, yeah, because tomorrow is basically the last day, it's the 31st of October, God willing. But anyway, let's move back to our question over here. So we have P0, okay, and of course we have Q0 over here. Right, we have Q0, and of course we have our equilibrium point over here. Okay, equilibrium point. There we go. So the question says they are complements in consumption. So if they are complements in consumption, students, we know that they are used together, right? They are used together. And if you are going to buy more or less of the one you are going to buy more or less of the other one. Now I need you to pay close attention to what's happening over here. All right, do I have your attention, students? And can you hear my voice? This let me just respond to that question over there. All right, let me just respond to that question over there. The consult it will be a consultation question. Sorry, a consultation session, students, which means that it won't be recorded. The consultation session works different from the official session. This is the last official session for the year. This is recorded, all right? And therefore, you have received the CTN email, you know, that the Academic Literacy Department endeavors to send you the links each and every week for the official recorded sessions, all right? But I've just now decided that we are going to have an online group consultation session where we will continue with our discussion. We see how far we can get this evening, and then we can basically continue. But that session that we will have tomorrow evening, God willing, it won't not be recorded. All right. Consultation sessions are not recorded. All right. But these sessions that we have on a Thursday, they are recorded. And unfortunately, this is our last session for the year. All right. Are we happy? Okay. And now, of course, students, you did give a thumbs up that you are in agreement that you are seeing these two graphs in front of you. Now, remember, complements in consumption, students. Okay. And of course, they are used together. And if you are going to buy more of the one, you're going to buy more of the other one. If you are going to buy less of the one, you are going to buy less of the other. Now it says over here, what will happen in the market for socks if the supply of shoes decreases? Now this is going to test your knowledge on the decrease in supply in terms of market equilibrium, and also going to test your knowledge on the law of demand. Now, there's a decrease in the supply of shoes. So let's see. The supply of shoes decreases, which means the supply curve for shoes shifts to the left. Do you see here? Now, what happens over here, students? Right? What happens over here? We indicate the shift in the supply curve over there, where your new supply curve meets your demand curve. That is now your new equilibrium point over here. Okay, so now you see, students, what happens over here. Okay, what do you note over there? That there's an increase in the equilibrium price of shoes. Okay, and there's a decrease in the equilibrium quantity of shoes. Do you see there? There's a decrease in the equilibrium quantity. So what we can say over there, okay, we can type over here. This is just a continuation of this question over here, right? So the decrease in the supply of shoes, right, has resulted in an increase in the price of shoes. You see, it has resulted in an increase in the price of shoes. Now we are moving into the law of demand now. Increase in the price of shoes. This means that people will buy less shoes. Do you see? People will buy less shoes. Are we together? In other words, we can also agree, seeing that the price of shoes increases, the quantity demanded for shoes decrease. And seeing that people are buying less shoes, they are going to buy less socks as well. But remember, the demand for socks is gonna decrease. The reason for the decrease in the demand for socks, students, has nothing to do with the price of socks. It had something to do with the increase in the price of shoes. Do you see? Because the supply of shoes decreased, which has resulted in an increase in the price of shoes. Therefore, the increase in the price of shoes has resulted in a decrease in the quantity demanded for shoes. People are buying less shoes now. They are going to buy less socks as well. So therefore, there's going to be a decrease in the demand for socks, because the decrease in the demand for socks had nothing to do with the price of socks, but it had everything to do with the increase in the price of shoes, which is a complement in consumption. Do you see? So our answer, I think a few of you already gave the answer over there. So the demand for socks will decrease. You see. We first had to determine what was the impact on the price of shoes due to the supply of shoes decreasing. Do you see? Are we together, students, with our answer for number 15 over there? Are we happy? Are we happy, students? Let me go to the chat to see if I've missed anything. I don't want to miss a comment or a right. The paper is actually uploaded, students. All right, but I will send you this paper in the bulk email this evening. All right, but it's fine. I'll send you this. There we go. All right, so I did not miss on any of your comments. So let us just go back to the session. Okay, so we're now going to move on to question 16. Again, it says over there, if shoes and if socks and shoes are complements in consumption, which of the following could be the cross price elasticity of demand for socks and shoes? Now, remember, students, this is now moving to so the cross price elasticity of demand, it can be negative or positive, right? Can be negative or positive and positive, right? If it is negative, we say that these goods are complements. Actually, there's a typo here for complement. This is a compliment if you pay somebody a compliment. That you say, I like your shoes, your hair is very, your hair is nice, etc., etc. Right? That is a compliment. But when you talk about, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Right? Negative in the terms of compliments, and then positive in terms of substitutes. So again, students, our answer, they are complements in consumption, but our answer will then be negative, right? So it will then most likely be -1 over here. All right. Are we together, students? Are we happy? It's most likely, but no. That's why I said, students, if you want this recording, you need to reach out to CT and TAT as soon as possible, right? Once the session is done. The session we will close off the session at past, and then we will use the remaining 5 or 10 minutes to do our last thing, to do our last question on not the last question, but our last evaluation form. Right? Cross elasticity, students. If you calculate the price elasticity of demand, your answer can be negative and positive. Okay? If it is negative, we are dealing with complements. If it is positive, we are dealing with substitutes. I did go into this in greater detail in my previous recording, students. So please have a read through those recordings as well. All right. It is in the notes. I will share with you the notes as well. I've already shared with you the notes. Like I said, I've lost count. Okay. So every email that you've received from me, there is notes. Whether it is for ECS1601 or 1501 or for 1500. You would have sure seen my emails over there, but I'm going to share the notes with you again. Okay. And also there's the recordings. You have the links now. All right. So you need to make time, students. You need to make time. All right. You need to make time. Okay. So the difference between cardinal and ordinal utility, students, I think the answer over there is number 1. Cardinal is a numerical value, and ordinal you can rank it. Okay. Relatively simple, and of course you can find the answer. The answer is in this is actually a memo. Okay, students, we've also done this question, right? We've done this question on utility. That's why I did say that we are not going to focus on utilities, because we have focused on utilities extensively, right? Just look at those recordings in September, August, right? I'm sure you'll find it there. We focused extensively on utilities over there, and of course the answers are here. Okay, the answers are there, students. We did this as well. That is production and cost, as you can see over here. Right. So this is the 20. I think this is a 2015 paper. Am I correct? Let me just go back to the beginning. Yeah, this is, no, this is the May-June 2017 paper. And then, of course, there's the suggested solutions as well. Alrighty then. There was also another question, students, about elasticity. Student mentioned that they actually got a little confused. All right. Now what? Let me just open some notes on my side. Right, let me see. ECS1501. I need to get ECS1501. Okay, let's do some context notes over here. Normally, students, I need you to take note of this, and of course, it is recorded as well. Any elasticity question that you get, let us just open it up and show the formulas as well. There's elasticity. There's also some very important notes there as well, that you need to go over. All right. I want to go to the formulas. You see, there's price elasticity of supply. There's the midpoint formula, and there's also the point formula. Okay. And then, of course, there's cross elasticity or cross price elasticity of demand. The answer can be both negative and positive. But what I need for you to note, students, any question that you will get when it comes to calculating the elasticity of demand, right? If you were to calculate the elasticity of demand and the question says use the midpoint formula or the arc formula, then you are going to use the midpoint formula or the arc formula. It's the exact same thing. All right. But if the question does not specify any formula, the go-to formula that you need to use is the point formula. Are we together, students? If the question does not specify which formula you need to use, you will go to the default setting, which is the point formula. Are we together? Are we together, students? Because if you look at this question over here, right? There's an elasticity question over here. Okay, right? Okay, this question over here. This is actually wrong, this answer, because we were not supposed to actually use this arc formula over here. You see, but I did the correction, students, the week thereafter, and I've also shared with you that. Okay, but let's do this over here. Let's do it. It says over here, when a local shop called Burger Boot, right? Where a local shop called Burger Boot decreases the price of hamburgers from 40 Rand to 35 Rand. The quantity of hamburgers demanded increased from 800 to 1,150. What is the price elasticity of demand for a burger at Burger Boot? Now you see, they did not specify which formula we need to use. Are we together, students? They did not specify which formula we need to use. They did not say use the midpoint formula, use the point formula. So the default formula that we are going to use, seeing that they did not specify any formula, it is the point formula. All right. Now, before we do that, we need to determine the first price is 40 Rand, right? That's the P1. The second price is 35 Rand, that's P2. Okay. The first quantity is 800, that's quantity 1, right? And the second quantity is 1,150, that's quantity 2. Now, what does the point formula tell us, students? I think let's do this over here, right? The point formula. The point formula basically says, students, that you take the change in the quantity, right? Q2 minus Q1, okay? Divide that by price 2 minus price 1. That is the slope, okay? Q2 minus, that's the change in quantity divided by the change in price. Multiplied by the original price, P1, divided by the original quantity, Q1. That's the point formula. All right. Now let's do the substitution over here. Of course, your formulas doesn't look like this because I'm typing it out, students. Your formula looks like this. Okay? The point formula, you can see it over there. Your point formula looks like that. That's your point formula over there. Change in quantity over change in price. Q2 minus Q1 divided by P2 minus P1. Okay? Multiplied by P1 over Q1. That's the point formula. Are we together? Are we together, students? All right. Are we happy? I don't see any thumbs ups. Okay. Well, we are running out of time, so let's just continue. Let's do the substitution. Price 2 is 35. Minus price 1, which is 40. Divide that by quantity 2, which is 1,150. Right? Minus quantity 1, which is 800. We multiply that by price 1. Price 1 is 40 over quantity 1, which is 800. Do you see? Let's make it a little bit smaller, the font size over here. Because then, of course, we can. So now we can further simplify that. 35 minus 40 is minus 5. Right? 1,150 minus 800, that's 350. You see, we multiply that by 40 over 800. Okay. Then, of course, we can calculate that, students. Right? We can basically do the calculation on our side. I'm going to open my calculator over here so that you can see. Okay? Because you basically can see everything that I'm doing. Right. It's also scientific, so we open the bracket, minus 5 divided by, no man, what's happening here? Sorry. Right. So we open the bracket, right? We open the bracket. Then, of course, minus 5, okay, divided by 350. We close bracket. Okay. And then, of course, we multiply that by, open the bracket, 40 over 800. No, man, this is wrong. Okay. Sorry about this, students. Trying to use this thingy over here. Right. Quantity 2 minus quantity 1. It is the quantity, not the price. Sorry, students. You see over here, I made an error. Right? Actually, the other way around. So it is 1,150 minus 800. And then, of course, this side, we take the 35 minus the 40. Do you see? I do apologize for that, students. Right? So over here, it actually becomes 350 divided by minus 5. You see? 350 divided by minus 5. Can you see that, students? I made an error over there. All right, so I do apologize for that. So it is actually the change in quantity divided by the change in price. I flipped it over. My apologies. So we can, of course, we can do it now. We will get the correct answer. We will definitely get the correct answer. So we take the 350 divided by negative 5. Right? No, man. 350 divided by -5. Right? No man, that's so 350 divided by -5 is -70, students. Okay, 350 divided by -5 is -70. So it's basically what we need to do over here. It is actually -70 multiplied, right? Open bracket, 40 divided by 800. And then we close the bracket. And then the answer that we get over there is -3,5, right? That is the answer that we get over there, -3,5. And then, of course, our answer will be, we use the positive value of 3,5. Then, of course, we can just look at our, let's just look at our memo over here. So that was question 2, eh? Sorry, question 3. Right, that was question 3. We actually did it before. Okay. I just want to check the memo. There we go. You see there? 3.5, right? That is our elasticity of demand over there. The one that we just calculated. So like I said, students, if the question does not specify which formula you should use the point formula. Okay. You can even look at question 2 as well, students. Question 2 is equilibrium quantity and price, a market equilibrium. Right? Not a common question over there. But what you need to know, students, is that your elasticity of demand answer, right? Your price elasticity of demand answer will always be negative. When you calculate the price elasticity of demand, students, your answer will always be negative. Why? Because of the inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded as per the law of demand. But if we want to interpret it, we use the positive value. Therefore, the answer that you got in the memo is positive 3.5. Your answer, yes, is negative because of the negative relationship between price and quantity demanded. But you are going to use the positive answer because now you want to determine whether it is inelastic, unit elastic, or elastic, which is specified in the notes over here as well. I even made a calculation example over here. So have a read through these notes as well. Okay. If you haven't done so, please do so as soon as possible. I will share this with you. Okay. And then, of course, if you look at question 3b, it says increase its total revenue made from hamburgers based on the price. Now, the final answer for question 3.8 students is 3.5. Eh? The EP, which is elasticity of demand, is 3.5. Which means that the elasticity coefficient is greater than 1 but less than infinity, which means that the demand is elastic. If the demand is elastic, it means that people or consumers are sensitive to the price. And if the consumers are sensitive to the price, that means if Burger Boot wants to increase the prices to increase total revenue, people are not going to buy it. So in order for Burger Boot to increase its total revenue, right? I'm going to type it over here. In order for Burger Boot to increase its total revenue, they are going to have to decrease their prices. You see, because people are sensitive to price. If they decrease their prices, the quantity demanded is going to skyrocket. If they charge a lower price, more people are going to buy. And as more people buy and buy and buy, their total revenue will increase. Because to calculate total revenue, remember students, the formula for total revenue is price multiplied by quantity. So if you decrease the price, the quantity will increase. Do you see? And if the quantity increases, the total revenue will increase as well. Right. Are we together with question 3B, students? You have a question. Remember, students, your microphones, they are disabled as per the setting. So you can't speak during the session. You can only make use of the chat, right? Only make use of the chat. I'm going to send it to you. All right, so you have to make sure that your email address is in the chat. So I'm going to send you this. All right. Okay, students, let's move to the next question. This is also, and I think this is more relevant to one, if I can remember earlier during the class, a student asked me about income elasticity of demand. Eh? So let's go to the notes on income elasticity of demand as well. So that's cross elasticity of demand. You see, there's income elasticity of demand. And very, very importantly, if we zoom in over here, you see with income elasticity of demand, students, the answer can also be both positive and negative, you see. If it is positive, then the good is a normal good. And of course, normal goods can be further divided. If it is positive and lies between 0 and 1, it is a necessity or an essential good. If it is positive and it is greater than 1 but less than infinity, it is a luxury good. If the income elasticity of demand is negative, then the good is an inferior good. You see, the good is an inferior good, which means that if the income increases, the quantity demand for that good decreases and vice versa. You get the arc formula for the income elasticity of demand, and you get the point formula. But again, students, again over here, you see, if you go back to the question, it says over here, when Sophie's income increases from 12,000 to 16,000 per month, the quantity of petrol demanded for a car increased from 40 liters to 45 liters per month. Calculate Sophie's income elasticity of demand for petrol. You see, nowhere does it mention over here which formula to use. It doesn't mention use the arc or the midpoint formula. It also does not mention use the point formula. But seeing that they did not mention it, students, we are going to be using the point formula. Okay, so what is the point formula? Remember, income elasticity of demand is denoted by EY. But first, let's specify. So the first income is Y1, that's 12,000. And then, of course, Y2 is our 16,000. The quantity demanded, the first quantity demanded, we say that's Q1, that's the 40 liters, and Q2, that is the 45 liters. So now, students, the point formula for income elasticity of demand, open the bracket, okay, it is the change in the quantity, which is quantity 2 minus quantity 1 divided by the change in income. Remember, instead of price, we have income now, income elasticity of demand. So it's Y2 minus Y1, okay? That is the slope. And then, of course, students, once we're done calculating the slope, we're going to multiply that by the first income divided by the first quantity. Right? Let's do our substitution over here. EY, open the bracket, quantity 2 is 45, minus quantity 1 is 40. Close the bracket. We divide that by, and we open the bracket. Income 2 is 16,000, minus income 1 is 12,000. We close the bracket. Then, of course, we multiply that by the ratio of 12,000, which is our first income, divided by our first quantity of 40 liters over there. Then, of course, we can do some further simplification over here, students. 45 minus 40 is 5. 16,000 minus 12,000, that's 4,000. Do you see? 12,000 minus 40, we can actually, sorry, not minus 40 divided by 40, eh? Sorry about that. We can actually simplify that. 12,000 divided by 40, that's 300. You see? Then, of course, we can do this on our calculator. So what we are going to do, students, we're going to take the 5 divided by the 4,000, and we are going to multiply that by 300. And the answer that we get is positive 0.375. Are we together, students? Are we together, students? But how we got to that answer, the income elasticity of demand. So now you see, over here, it is positive. So that means, you can see over there, students, based on Sophie's income elasticity of demand for petrol, explain what type of good petrol is. Firstly, the answer was positive. So petrol, right, can say the income elasticity of demand was positive, meaning petrol is a normal good, right? However, petrol is a normal good. However, it is also an essential good, or we can call it a necessity. Why? Because it's positive, greater than 0, but less than 1. So that means it is a necessity. It is a normal good, but also it is a necessity. Are we together, students? Are we together? Are we happy? Alrighty then. I'm going to stop the recording over here, students, but I don't want to leave you as of yet. I don't want you to leave as of yet. So I just want you to complete the